Woke. What is it? It depends on who you ask. The term has been weaponized by politicians, talking heads, and every internet philosopher with a podcast. People are either proudly claiming it or desperately trying to prove they're not woke, like it's some sort of social credit score of our time. Now, instead of repeating the same old talking points by so many other YouTubers out there, I'd like to share my own perspective as an artist, as well as look at it from the archetypal lens of the tarot. Well, this channel is all about art and archetypes after all. The thing is that this whole debate isn't new to me. I've seen the dogma firsthand, way before it became a buzzword. Back in the 90s, when I was in art school, and I found myself constantly outnumbered by an angry mob of lesbian feminists. Now, before you get too excited, let me clarify. I wasn't outnumbered in a fun, sexy way. I mean, I was at the receiving end of a relentless ideological purification ritual. And the crazy part, I wasn't even trying to paint anything remotely subversive. I was just trying to draw nudes, you know, like every other artist before me for centuries. But in their eyes, that was objectification, reinforcing the patriarchal, colonialist hegemony. Look, I've got nothing against feminism in itself. And in fact, I believe it's crucially important that we have equal rights in every sense of the word. My issue is when ideologies become radicalized with hate towards anyone who doesn't look like them or embody their ideals. Now, fast forward to today, the same folks who once told me that drawing a classical nude was perpetuating the patriarchal, colonialist hegemony, whatever that meant at the moment, are now vibing to reggaeton tracks that reduce women to, well, let's say, assets. Makes perfect sense, right? The only explanation I can come up with, and maybe, just maybe, it wasn't really about art. It was about power, to show who's in charge, and took it out on those of us who weren't looking for a confrontation, just trying to learn how to paint. But instead of an education in art, I got a crash course on how ideology, when wielded like a club, can become its own form of oppression. Now, let's add a few more layers to my identity in case you're wondering, why was I a walking target? Well, I happen to look very white, very straight, a quiet student who looked like the love child of Christopher Columbus and a Whole Foods manager. And to top it off, my name is Patrick. I mean, come on. I'm basically a walking, talking colonial oppressor in their eyes. It was like showing up to art school with a flashing neon sign on me that said, "Punch me, I am the patriarchy." And that, my friends, is how I was woke before it was cool. By the time I finished my master's degree, I was super woke. Without even realizing it, I had taken the pill, joined the movement, and I was all in. I genuinely believed history was a simple battle of good versus evil, the oppressed versus the oppressors, empire and colonies, and that every institution, every system, every historical figure was either on the right or wrong side of justice. And then one day I came across Sapiens by Yuval Noah Harari, specifically the chapter on empires, where Harari lays out something that should be obvious but isn't in woke academia. History is not black and white. Yes, empires were oppressive. Yes, they did awful things, but they also built roads, established global trade, and introduced new sciences, philosophies, and legal systems. The British Empire, for example, brought things to India that had long-term benefits. Now, does that erase the horrors of colonialism? Of course not. But does it complicate the narrative? Absolutely. And that's when I started seeing cracks in my once rigid beliefs. Then came the real wake-up call. I was uninvited from giving a talk at an academic institution. Why? Because I didn't meet the criteria of looking Latino enough. In other words, I was too white. Never mind that I grew up in Puerto Rico, consider myself Puerto Rican, my first language is Spanish, and spent most of my life there in the island, and my work directly engaged with Latin American history and culture. No, it's not enough. I didn't look the part. And that's when I realized some of the very people claiming to fight against racism had no problem engaging in their own version of it. But enough of personal drama. Let's zoom out and look at this through an archetypal lens using my favorite tool for it, tarot. If woke means being aware, being awake, then this isn't new. It's part of a much older story. In tarot, the Fool represents the beginning of a journey. He steps off the cliff, blissfully unaware of what's ahead. He's a seeker, but also, well, a bit clueless. He represents innocence, ignorance, and stepping into the unknown. When someone says they're woke, they're essentially saying, I've stepped off the cliff of ignorance and survived. But here's the thing, the Fool doesn't know he's the Fool. Awakening is always the beginning of the journey, not the end. Everyone, including myself, at some point is the Fool. Maybe you just discovered systemic inequality, or the horrors of capitalism, or how every single thing you enjoy is problematic in some way. And suddenly, you're seeing the world through a completely new lens. Congratulations, you're woke. But just like the Fool, you're also dangerously close to falling into something much worse. Plato nailed it with his allegory of the cave. People who escape the cave think they've got it all figured out. They rush back to enlighten their friends expecting applause. Instead, they're met with stones. Because let's face it, truth is inconvenient, uncomfortable, and usually unwelcome. After the Fool wakes up, what happens? He seeks guidance. After the awakening, the Fool encounters the Hierophant, or the Pope, the archetype of structure, tradition, and authority. Initially, that's helpful, but the dark side is clear. What starts as an insight easily solidifies into dogma. The Hierophant isn't just your wise mentor. He's also your university professor who assigns required reading and tells you exactly which artists are morally acceptable to admire. Here's the art professor who insists you unpack your privilege before you even learned how to mix colors. This card represents not just the church, but the academy and the cultural authority that decides what's right, what's wrong, and who's allowed to speak. Recognize a pattern yet? Every movement, no matter how well-intentioned, has a Hierophant phase. The problem with wokeness, or any ideological system for this case, isn't the awakening itself. It's when questioning becomes forbidden, when awareness stops being a journey and starts being a test of purity. And that's when we get the devil, the archetype of temptation, bondage, and yes, ideological entrapment. No, not the fun, rebellious, play some rock and roll, sex, drugs, and break the rules kind of devil. I'm talking about the shadow side, the seductive cult leader that binds people. The devil represents addiction, control, obsession. In this context, it's the moment where a movement that started as awareness turns into a self-perpetuating cycle of outrage, fear, and constant policing of thought. You don't have to be woke. You have to be the wokest. And if you step out of line, even slightly, congratulations, you're canceled. The devil represents the seductive power of ideology when it becomes self-righteous, aggressive, and obsessed with purity tests. It's about control, masked as liberation, where freedom of thought becomes heresy, curiosity is heresy, nuance is heresy. You're either fully woke or fully canceled. There's no middle ground. Which brings us to today, where woke has been stretched, twisted, and distorted until it means everything and nothing at the same time. And if you think the devil archetype only applies to one side of the spectrum, think again. Because if there's one thing that unites the far left and the far right, it's their love for canceling people. We talk a lot about cancel culture on the left, where people get shunned, deplatformed, and lose their jobs over a bad take, old tweet, sometimes just guilt by association. And yes, that can be a real problem, but let's be honest, cancel culture on the right can be as bad or even worse, because when the right cancels you, it's not just about losing followers. You can be blacklisted by your own government, have your career dismantled, and in extreme cases, even be deported or receive death threats for speaking your mind. Let's look at history. The US government has always had its own version of cancel culture. Whether it was McCarthyism, blacklisting communists in the 50s, the FBI targeting civil rights leaders, or more recently, states banning books, censoring classrooms, and threatening to prosecute journalists. The same people who mock cancel culture on the left are perfectly fine with restricting what history can be taught in schools and using the government to silence their political opponents. That's not anti-woke. That's just a different brand of authoritarianism. Look, we live in a country of free speech. Or at least we should. The moment we start thinking it's okay to silence people who just because we don't like them or what they have to say, we've already lost. And it goes both ways. You don't have to agree with everything you hear, not even what I'm saying. You don't have to like every piece of art or every opinion someone shares. But if you think canceling, silencing, or punishing people for their views will stop bad ideas, you're missing the point. Suppression doesn't kill bad ideas. It just makes them go underground and come back stronger. Side note, interestingly, the term woke has now been completely co-opted by the political right as a umbrella catch-all term for anything they don't like, whether it's climate change, LGBTQ rights, inclusive casting, or even student loan forgiveness. If it's progressive or inconvenient to the status quo, they slap a big red woke label on it and toss it into the culture war meat grinder. The word no longer describes awareness. It just describes annoyance. We gotta be aware of that. Historically, woke was a genuine call for social justice, originally in the Black community, to remain aware of systemic racial injustice. But let's break it down. First, it took root in academia, where social theories like critical race theory, gender studies, and post-colonial analysis were developed and debated. Then, it spilled into the streets and influencing movements like the civil rights, Occupy Wall Street, and Black Lives Matter, where it became a rallying cry for change. All fair. There's a solid argument for it. Then, of course, Hollywood jumped in. Sometimes this meant representation. Other times, it was just a clever marketing strategy, using activism to sell more tickets and make speeches at award shows. And then came corporations, the ultimate opportunists. Suddenly, every brand wanted to be woke. They threw a rainbow onto their logo during Pride Month, released statements about social justice, while exploiting cheap labor, and made sure their commercials included the right diversity checklist to keep the outrage mob at bay. Today, it's evolved into a lifestyle brand. It's now something you buy, perform, and hashtag. Corporations realized awareness sells. Starbucks cups, Nike stickers, Netflix specials. Woke turned into just another consumer choice. And suddenly, your social consciousness comes with every seat. Thank you very much for your business. And now, we're in the government backlash phase. Certain politicians have turned their anti-woke into their entire platform. DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives are being slashed, anti-woke bills are being passed, and the term itself has become a political football. As usual, one extreme invites another. The thing is, both sides have problems. Wokeness, when taken to an extreme, can become suffocating and dogmatic. But dismissing diversity and inclusion altogether, well, that's just willful ignorance. The reality is we live in a diverse world and representation does matter. There are real, valid, important arguments for social justice. And let's be clear, climate change is real. If you think climate change is some woke conspiracy, you might as well believe the Earth is flat. But at the same time, not everything being done in the name of activism makes sense. Like, let's talk about throwing canned soup at a Velázquez painting, or just trying to cut these old master paintings to protest the oil industry. Really? What do oil paintings have to do with the oil industry? Do these guys even know that oil paintings and crude oil are two completely different types of oil? One gives us las meninas, the other gives us environmental collapse. It's not the same thing, people. If you want to throw soup, fine, but at least throw it at the corporate board meetings of the industry you hate. You want to make a point? Aim at the people actually driving climate destruction, not the museums preserving our cultural heritage. And while we're on the topic of performative activism, let me share something on a personal note. I've been vegetarian for most of my life. Do I go around virtue signaling about it? Do I harass people for eating meat? Do I make a TikTok video screaming or shouting at someone for enjoying a steak? No, because it's a personal choice. I don't need validation for it. I do it because it aligns with my values, not because I want some social brownie points. We live in such a narcissistic society where everyone feels the need to be seen, waving a flag for something, not because they're deeply committed to the cause, but because it makes them feel good about their empty consumerist life. It's activism as a personality trait. It's about getting likes, not making a change. So here's my final take. Every society has its awakenings. Some are real, some are co-opted, sometimes by corporations. Some become new forms of control. But the real question isn't, are you woke? The real question is, are you paying attention? Can you stay awake without becoming trapped in another illusion? That's the challenge. Art, real art, isn't about fitting into a movement. It's about seeing things clearly, questioning reality. Francisco Goya painted El sueño de la razón produce monstruos. The sleep of reason produces monsters, to show how blind ideology leads to chaos. Picasso painted Guernica to confront the horrors of war. True artistic awakening isn't about parroting slogans or bumper stickers. It's about asking the difficult questions. True artistic awakening isn't about shouting louder. It's about listening deeper. Goya knew this. Picasso knew it. And many artists today still know it. That's what I try to do with my own work. Peel back the layers of mythology, history, and consumer culture to expose what's really going under the surface. At the end of the fool's journey is the world, symbolizing unity and integration. Maybe that's the real awakening. It's understanding complexity, embracing contradictions, and refusing to let dogma dictate your art and your life. But hey, don't listen to me. What do I know? After all, look at me. I just look like a colonizer. My name, Patrick. But if you like this video, I appreciate that. Hit the like button, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and I hope to see you in the next one. And if you didn't like this video, you're more than welcome to unsubscribe. Cancel me if that's your thing. Either way, I'll still be here painting, making more videos, and watching this whole madness unfold. Because what else there is to do, right? Till next time, peace. Thank you very much for sticking around till the end. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, hit that subscribe button, and tap the notification bell so you don't miss out on future content. Also, check out the video on the screen right now for more insights and inspiration. Your support means everything to me and helps this channel grow. Thanks again, and I'll see you in the next one.